Hello, my seeking friend. Tell me, have you ever found yourself in this place? The world around you is quiet. Perhaps it's the deep stillness of night or the gentle hush of early morning. Yet inside your head, a veritable whirlwind is raging. Thoughts, images, memories flicker and flash with dizzying speed, like a frantic kaleidoscope, refusing to grant you even a single moment of peace. You try to focus on something truly important, on deep inner contemplation, or perhaps you simply yearn to feel that stillness resonate within you. But then they arrive, those intrusive pictures from your past, those uninvited fantasies about the future, bursting in without an invitation, invading your personal space, stealing your inner peace, your precious energy. Have you ever felt how this inner commotion, this endless movie screening in your mind, exhausts you to your very core, distracting you from what truly matters, from that deep, soulful call that so desperately longs to be heard? It's as if you're standing on the shores of the vast ocean of your inner being, but instead of its boundless power and unfathomable depth, all you can see are the tiny ripples on the surface, stirred up by the fleeting winds of momentary impressions. And these ripples, these waves of your imagination and memory, don't just bother you. They can swell into a veritable storm, carrying you further and further away from the quiet, calm harbor of your true self. We've been conditioned to think of imagination as a priceless gift, an inexhaustible wellspring of creativity, and memory as the treasure chest of our accumulated experience. And, to a certain extent, that's undoubtedly true. But what if I told you that these very same faculties, when left without sensitive, conscious guidance, without wise direction, can transform into the actual tyrants of your inner world? What if it's precisely these seemingly harmless imprints of everything you've ever seen, heard, or experienced that become the invisible chains binding you to the treadmill of daily anxieties, and at times even pulling you into states far removed from harmony, disturbing your natural state of well-being, your sincere aspiration for light and clarity? This doesn't just happen when you're awake, actively engaging with the world, but also in your dreams, when your conscious mind loosens its grip. Then these fleeting impressions can haunt you, casting a shadow over more than just the following day. The paradox is that we search for freedom, we strive for spiritual purity, for a life filled with profound meaning and inner light. Yet we all too often underestimate the true power of this inner filmmaker who tirelessly, day and night, keeps replaying the film of our past sensations and experiences. But there is a truth, a deep and not always obvious one to the superficial, everyday gaze, a truth that can become your precious key to genuine liberation. This truth is that a true, profound encounter with the infinite, with what we might call the source of all being, the primal cause of all existence, occurs in that sacred space that lies beyond all images, beyond any sensory representation. Try to feel this. This absolute original reality exists outside the sphere of influence of all our five senses and everything they can perceive. It is beyond our usual categories of form, color, measure, and place. It is utterly formless and featureless in the way we typically understand form and feature. It is omnipresent, yet it is immeasurably beyond everything. And this means that it is also beyond all imagination created by our mind. No picture, no matter how sublime or beautiful, generated by our intellect, can contain it, describe it, or define it. The wise sages of antiquity, who deeply understood the nature of reality, said, "No imagination has a place concerning this supreme reality, for it is beyond all thought and abides beyond everything." Realize this with your entire being. The very faculty we call imagination, by its most fundamental nature, is incapable of leading us into the abode of union with this boundless essence. Imagination operates with the imprints of the material, manifested world, while that to which we aspire is pure, ineffable spirit, the very ground of being. Let's dive deeper into this understanding. Our external senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, are like a seal that leaves its unique imprint on soft wax. And imagination and memory are precisely that wax, carefully or carelessly preserving these countless imprints. We see a city, for example, a distant and beautiful place, then we leave it and we no longer perceive it with our physical eyes. But if we just wish for it, there it is, instantly appearing in our inner space. Its bustling streets, ancient buildings, elusive scents, characteristic sounds. It's not that our soul mystically transports itself to that city, as some, misled by a superficial understanding, believe. It is we ourselves, within ourselves, who see its living image, once precisely imprinted. And this is undoubtedly wonderful and useful when we need to recall something important and constructive. But imagination is a force that largely acts mechanically, obeying the laws of association, often chaotic and unpredictable. It is devoid of reason at its core. It is blind. And spiritual life, the authentic path of self-discovery, is a path of pure, conscious freedom, a path of deliberate choice. And it is right here at this juncture that a deep inner conflict arises. Look, even in the most ancient myths and legends of humanity, we find vivid echoes of this fundamental truth. It is said that a certain entity, once first among luminous beings, a pure and clear intelligence, abided above all undisciplined imagination, beyond our usual categories of form and color, being by its nature non-material and non-corporeal. But when it began to dream, when it filled its mind with images of equality with the source, it fell from this formless, imageless, dispassionate state into a multifaceted, complex, and one might say, densified imagination. From a being of light, it transformed into something else, as if cloaking itself in the coarse density of images. And those who were connected with it followed suit. Ancient texts say that these fallen entities, once pure minds having descended, acquired a certain material density, each according to its rank and actions. They, like humans, lost their original spiritual sweetness and divine delight, being condemned to find their pleasure in the earthly, in the passionate, in the transient. This is why sages call this distorting force the great illusionist, the many-faced serpent, feeding on the dust of passions, the fantasist. Some ancient writings even depict it as having taken on a kind of symbolic corporeal form. Understand, my friend, if this multifaceted, unruly fantasy is a product of that force which fell away from the original light, then how can it possibly be useful to us in our sincere aspiration towards that light? Wise teachers rightly call it a bridge by which dark, destructive influences penetrate the soul, mingling with it, turning it into a buzzing hive of destructive thoughts, an abode of fears, anxieties, and all sorts of impure impulses, both mental and physical. And even the first human, as some ancient teachings tell, in their original purity, was created free from the dominance of imagination in its lower aspect. Their mind, pure and formless, did not shape images under the influence of external senses or material objects in the way it happens now. They contemplated the pure ideas of things, their deep meanings with the higher power of the soul, pure, untainted thought. But that same illusory force itself, having fallen through prideful dreaming, also led them to the point where they began to dream with their mind of an unattainable equality with the source. And through this distorted dreaming, they fell, losing their primordial harmony. From that mental, almost angelic, pure, rational, and imageless, in the sense of freedom from limiting images, life, they were cast down into this sensory, complex, multifaceted, image and dream-laden life, almost into the state of beings guided only by instincts. For to be completely immersed in images, to live exclusively by them and under their constant influence, is a characteristic of an unreasoning, instinctive nature, not of beings endowed with the spark of divine reason. And who can count into what passions, what moral decay, what deep delusions humanity was led by this uncontrolled imaginative dreaming? It filled ethical teachings with temptations and distortions, natural sciences with false theories, and spiritual quests with absurd dogmas and empty fables. And not only the ancients, but many modern thinkers, attempting to discourse on the supreme and on divine mysteries, which by their nature are simple and inaccessible to crude imagination, approach this great task without first purifying their minds of passionate, distorted images. And instead of shining truth, they found only dim falsehood, clinging tightly to it as if it were genuine reality. Instead of becoming conduits of wisdom, they became tellers of empty tales. So, My dear companion on this path, if you truly, with all your heart, desire to easily and comfortably free yourself from these deeply ingrained delusions and destructive passions, if you sincerely seek a way to avoid the countless nets and traps of the illusory ego, if you passionately yearn to unite with the source of all light and enduring truth, then you must courageously and decisively enter into a noble inner battle with your own imagination. Yes, indeed, a battle, but not a battle of annihilation, rather one of transformation. Fight it with all the powers of your soul available to you, to strip your mind bare of all these fleeting sights, obsessive colors, habitual outlines, of all imagination and tenacious memory of sensory things, both those that seem good to you and those you consider bad. For all of this, in the end, is merely dust, merely stains obscuring the original purity and natural brightness of your mind, densifying its subtle, ethereal nature, and serving as a cunning conduit for the entry of passions. Understand this deeply. Almost no passion, whether mental or physical, can approach your mind except through the prior imagination of corresponding sensory things. Therefore, strive, make an effort, to keep your mind colorless, formless, in the sense of being free from intrusive forms, featureless and crystal clear, as it was originally intended to be. But how can I achieve this? You will surely ask. This is a great art, requiring patience, persistence, and daily practice. Here is the first and most important, most fundamental method, which you should always hold in your heart as a most precious compass. This path consists in returning your wandering mind back into yourself, enclosing it in the close, yet sacred and safe space of your heart, your entire inner being. Teach it to abide there, within, steadfastly, in this center of your being. This is achieved through a sacred inner practice, when with an inner, silent word, quietly, with focus and love, you call out to the Supreme, using the form of address that is closest to your heart, or simply immerse yourself in deep, conscious attention to yourself, observing yourself without judgment, but with clear, impartial understanding, and, most importantly, contemplating the presence, and in it, finding your true peace and serenity. You know, there's an ancient and wise analogy. A snake, when it's time to shed its old, outworn skin, finds a very tight, narrow passage and with great effort squeezes itself through it. In the same way, the mind, by squeezing through the symbolic straits of the heart and focused inner practice in the heart, gradually sheds this old, worn-out garment of obsessive imagination of sensory things and all unkind, burdensome impressions of the past. It becomes pure, clear, bright, and capable of deep, true union with the source, because through this inner work, it rediscovers its original likeness to it. Picture this too. Water. The more it is confined in narrow, tight passages, the more powerfully it presses and the faster, more stramitalno it rushes upwards. So too the mind. The more it is concentrated and confined by sacred heart-centered instruction and keen attention to itself, the more refined, perceptive, and strong it becomes. Aspiring upwards towards higher states of consciousness, it becomes increasingly inaccessible to every passion, to every random influx of extraneous thoughts, to every intrusive image of things, not only sensory, but also purely mental, because in such a state they remain outside, unable to penetrate within and disturb its peace. And one more comparison, perhaps the most accurate and inspiring. The rays of the sun, when scattered in the boundless expanse of the air, possess neither particular brightness nor significant warmth. But if those same rays are gathered and focused into a single point with a magnifying glass, they produce a dazzling, unbearable light and can even ignite a fire. In the same way, the mind, when gathered and concentrated in the very center of your being, in the heart, through keen attention to itself and deep inner work, becomes luminous and all-consuming. It dispels the darkness of materiality and passion. It literally burns and annihilates all images and movements of a similar destructive kind. By this path, you will not only correct and harmonize your imagination and memory, but you will also gradually erase from them all traces and remnants of previously absorbed impressions that constantly arouse and feed your passions and anxieties. Yes, this method is incredibly effective and fruitful, but it is also, let's be honest, the most challenging, requiring the greatest self-discipline. And the more difficult it is, the fewer people today, unfortunately, are willing to use it. Not to mention those who sincerely believe in its transformative power, especially among those who consider themselves wise and knowledgeable teachers, not only secular, but sometimes even spiritual. They unwilling to trust the ancient wisdom and experience of countless seekers of truth who point to this sacred path, justly deprive themselves of those precious fruits of the Spirit that many simple and even unlettered people, walking the path of the heart, are able to attain. For, as the wise have said, the Supreme often conceals its secrets from the excessively clever and self-assuredly rational, and reveals them to those who are like innocent children, those who with childlike faith, openness, and simplicity embrace this inner work. For those who do not believe in the power of this intelligent, heart-centered practice and do not dare to undertake it with due diligence, can in no way comprehend how beneficial and transformative it is. But when you feel that your mind is growing weary and can no longer maintain the necessary concentration within the heart in this deep mind-heart practice, then you can resort to a second method. Allow it to venture outward for a time, but not to wander aimlessly through the labyrinths of trivial thoughts, but to find healing space in lofty spiritual reflections and contemplations. Draw inspiration for them from sacred texts of various traditions, from the wise teachings of enlightened masters, from contemplating the majestic creations of the universe. Such spiritual reflections, being akin to the mind by their subtlety and non-materiality, do not cause it to become coarse and do not chain it to the external, transient. On the contrary, having satisfied to a reasonable extent its natural thirst for free movement in its true domain, their high content gently disposes it to return again, with renewed strength more quickly, into the silence of the heart, to unity with the source through deep immersion of itself in the mental remembrance of it alone, of its omnipresent presence. One great teacher of antiquity said that mere action, focused inner practice alone, cannot make the mind completely dispassionate and free if, at the same time, it does not occasionally immerse itself in diverse spiritual contemplations. However, be especially attentive and cautious. When examining the creations of nature, material objects, and living beings, do not dwell solely on their external physical aspect, especially while you still feel a strong influence of passions and attachments within you, because in that case your mind, not yet completely free from a passionate, distorted view of sensory things, instead of naturally moving from them to the comprehension of spiritual and non-material meanings deeply hidden within them, will be easily carried away by their mere external beauty and deceptive attractiveness. Delighting in this superficial charm, it may unconsciously accept false, illusory teachings about them and develop passionate, unhealthy dispositions and attachments to them, as unfortunately happened to many thinkers and researchers of nature, blinded by external form. And there is a third way to give necessary rest and healing repose to your mind. Undertake to reflect on the deepest mysteries of life, on the path of great souls, on examples of self-sacrifice and compassion. Reflect on the cycles of birth and death, on the laws of cause and effect, on the fragility of earthly existence and the eternity of the spirit. Recall the inspiring stories of those who have walked the path of transformation, who have overcome their limitations and attained enlightenment. You can also reflect on the destinies of humanity, on the search for meaning, on the eternal questions of existence. Likewise, to awaken deep feelings and to quell egoistic tendencies, you can contemplate the mystery of the transitional hour known as death. The great day of reckoning for one's own life, the various states of consciousness that may follow this transition, depending on the accumulated baggage of thoughts, words, and deeds. Contemplate the boundless realms of inner light and inexpressible joy of those who lived righteously and in harmony with universal laws, the kingdom of inner peace, the eternal glory of the Spirit, and the unceasing bliss of union with the Source. Imagine this state of most perfect union, of eternal coexistence with pure and luminous beings. If you, my friend, paint such lofty thoughts and luminous representations on the invisible canvas of your inner world, you will not only gradually free yourself from the burden of unnecessary, burdensome memories and destructive, evil thoughts, but you will also acquire great inner strength and clarity, which will become your support in the moment of final reckoning, before your conscience and before eternity. One wise mentor said that every person living in this body is like an artist who, in a secret, secluded place in their workshop, paints a certain picture. When this artist, having finished their work, brings it out from its secret hiding place for public viewing, they are praised by the spectators if they chose a noble, lofty subject for their painting and managed to depict it well, skillfully. And conversely, they are censured and condemned if the subject they chose was bad, base, and they painted it poorly, unskillfully. So too, every person, when at the end of their earthly journey their soul stands before the face of truth, will be inwardly approved and at peace if they manage to adorn their mind and imagination with bright, divine, and spiritual images and representations. And conversely, they will experience deep regret and shame if they filled their inner space with passionate, shameful, and base pictures. But please understand me correctly. I am not urging you to always and exclusively engage only in these lofty reflections. Not at all. Use them only from time to time, like a healing balm, while your mind, weary from the efforts of holding itself in the focused silence of the heart, rests a little and recovers its strength. But when it has rested, gently but persistently, return it again to the sacred space of the heart and encourage it again and again to abide there without unnecessary daydreams and intrusive images, in pure conscious remembrance of the Supreme Presence. For just as all shelled creatures find no true peace anywhere except in their reliable shells, where they hide as in their own home, so too the mind, by its natural inclination, nowhere rests so deeply and fully as in the quiet temple of the heart and in the inner, secret self. There, hiding as in an impregnable fortress, it most successfully and auspiciously wages its invisible battle with wandering thoughts, inner enemies' illusions, and destructive passions, which are also hidden right there, within, in the depths of the subconscious. Although the vast majority of people, unfortunately, are unaware and unconscious of this, that it is precisely passions and disordered thoughts that nestle deep within us, in the very heart of our being, and from there constantly emerge, attacking us and struggling with us. This is not my personal invention. The very voice of truth within us whispers, "It is from the heart that evil thoughts proceed, leading to destructive actions, deceit, envy, pride, anger. It is this that defiles a person from within." And that our inner enemies, these dark aspects of our own ego, these destructive programs, hide in the immediate vicinity of our spiritual heart. This too is not my personal fabrication. So teach many sages and spiritual mentors. One of them explains this with great clarity and definiteness, saying that before the moment of spiritual awakening, before the baptism by the fire of the Spirit, a higher grace impels a person to good deeds as if from without, while the dark, egoistic force lurks in the very depths of the soul and heart. But after a person receives this spiritual baptism, a transformation occurs. The dark aspect is, as it were, expelled from the center, and the luminous, divine grace takes up residence within, in the very heart. However, even after this spiritual rebirth, he says further, these inner enemies, tempters, are permitted to be in the depths of our being, as if on the very surface of the heart, for the testing and strengthening of our free will. And from here, like smoke, they smudge our clear mind with the vapors of carnal, egoistic desires and illusory pleasures. One great mystic, interpreting an ancient saying about how an unclean, destructive spirit leaves a person and then returns to them to cause even greater harm, says that this happens to those who have reached a certain level of spiritual purification, but then neglected to constantly abide in their heart, in the center of their being. Expelled by spiritual practice, this unclean, egoistic spirit, he says, not liking to remain homeless and shelterless, seeks rest for itself, wandering here and there through the nooks and crannies of the soul, and, not finding it, eventually returns to that house from which it was expelled, because it is shameless and persistent. If it finds that the light of consciousness, carefully guarded by the attention and love of the awakened person, has firmly established itself and unceasingly abides in the place from which it was expelled, that is, in the very heart, then being repelled again by this power of light, it goes away without any success. But if it finds in someone its former place empty, unoccupied by anything, due to a lack of proper attention to the Supreme and a living memory of it, then it hastily enters there again, but now with greater, compared to before, malice and destructive power. And for such a person, the latter state becomes even worse and more difficult than the first. I have deliberately dwelt on this important point at such length to more strongly incline you to steadfastly, constantly abide within your heart with a living memory of the supreme guidance and with sincere, heartfelt prayer communion with it. If you truly desire to always emerge victorious from all inner disturbances caused by intrusive thoughts and turbulent, passionate movements that are constantly wafted upon your heart from without and from within, when you are there, in that sacred center with the source, the enemy will not even dare to approach. And above all this, I tell you with all sincerity, be vigilant over yourself. Be a watchful guardian of your inner world. Do not allow your imagination and your memory ceaselessly and uncontrollably to resurrect in your mind all that you have previously seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. And especially carefully guard yourself from memories of what was shameful, base, and unwholesome in that experience. It is in this that our main invisible inner battle primarily consists, and it, believe me, is immeasurably more difficult and tenacious than the battle with external senses or with their correct use. Anyone who has ever seriously embarked on the path of this inner struggle knows this from their own bitter or sweet experience. To refrain from perceiving something tempting or destructive through one of the external senses is, in essence, relatively easy. But after that perception has already occurred, to manage the obsessive imagination and tenacious memory of it, oh, that is already very, very difficult. For example, to see or not see a certain face, to look at it with passionate desire or completely dispassionately, this is not so difficult and usually does not constitute a great inner struggle. But after you have already seen that face, in yielding to weakness, looked at it with passion, it is no longer easy at all, but requires tremendous inner struggle and no small spiritual effort to banish the obsessive imagination of that face from your memory. And then your inner adversary, your undisciplined ego, can play with your soul like a small ball, mercilessly tossing your attention from one tormenting memory to another, and under the cover of these images, subtly stirring and inflaming base desires and destructive passions within you, and thus constantly keeping you in an agonizing, passionate, unbalanced state. Therefore, again and again I say to you, be vigilant, be on guard, and above all else, watch carefully over your imagination and your memory. So begin today, right now, in this very moment, this blessed journey to the true liberation of your mind and heart. Start with the smallest, simplest step. Sit in silence for at least a few minutes. Close your eyes and simply observe the endless stream of your thoughts and fleeting images, trying not to get entangled in them, not to judge them, not to cling to them. And then gently but persistently, with love, return your scattered attention to the very depth of your heart, to that quiet, secret center of your being. Try to feel the stillness there, even if it's barely perceptible, almost elusive at first, and utter the words of your personal prayer address, or simply be in that sacred inner space, savoring its peace. Ask yourself honestly, what images have I painted on the invisible canvas of my mind today, during this day? Did they serve my spiritual growth, my inner light? Or did they subtly pull me down into habitual restlessness, anxiety, and inner discord? What kind of artist of my own inner world do I truly want to be? This is daily, painstaking work, my friend, but it yields fruits infinitely more valuable and lasting than all the treasures of this transient world. It bestows deep inner peace, crystal clarity of consciousness, indomitable spiritual strength, and true unconditional freedom. Within you, precisely within you, lies boundless, divine power for this amazing transformation. Within you is this quiet, unshakable center, this secret sanctuary of your heart, where you can always meet with eternity, with your true self. The path is open before you. Take the first, most important step, and then another, and another, and you will surely see the fog of illusions gradually dissipate, and the life-giving sun of your true, Divine Self, rise brightly.